Here are some of the headlines we are featuring today from your favorite news outlets at offthepress.com. Congress is scheduled to return after Labor Day, and it's gearing up for a new fight over funding. Some conservatives, led by Marjorie Taylor Greene, said they won't fund the government unless the impeachment of President Biden is on the table. The White House, meanwhile, is seeking a short-term funding deal. January 6 cases are still filling the nation's courthouses. In the latest case, a top Proud Boys leader was sentenced to jail for a near-record 17 years. Despite all of Biden's bailout plans, deadbeat students will have to begin paying back their student loans in a month, just like the rest of us do with our loans. And on a weekend where there are typically many gun shows around the nation, the president announced plans to crack down on resellers and impose fines up to $250,000. For stories like these and more updates all day long from your favorite news outlets, go to offthepress.com.
America's Voice Live, America's fastest growing news program. With Steve Gruber.
You've got to put America first. You do that by voting and bringing your friends to do the same.
Delivering the latest news, observations, and opinions. With the entire Real America's Voice team, America's Voice Live starts now.
Welcome to America's Voice Live. I'm Steve Gruber. Today is Friday, September 1st, believe it or not. Let's get to the day's top stories, and thank you for spending the week with us. Why do liberals want total control of your life and mine? And why does it go so disastrously wrong? We'll explore that today. President Joe Biden and many other Democrats are saying the destruction caused by Hurricane Idalia is all about climate change. We'll tell you why that's a ridiculous claim. And how close are Republicans getting to impeaching Joe Biden? We'll take a look at that question and come up with an answer in just a moment. But here's where we start. With the Democrats in charge of the Senate and the White House, after just losing control of the House in the midterms, it's really hard to figure out where to start every day. There's a lot of work here, as you can understand. I mean, there really is not one thing you can point to right now and say, look, yeah, they're doing a great job over here. At least they're doing good on this topic, and America's doing great over here. You can't do that. I'm sorry, but with the feeble, senile old man wandering around in a near coma-like state far too often, it's just not a good place to me. Look, I remember back in 1979 and 1980 when the American hostages were taken by the Iranians, 52 of them, as I recall. 444 days they were held, not released until the day Ronald Reagan was sworn in as the 40th president. They feared him, you see. Jimmy Carter in the White House made us all feel weak, and Joe Biden's worse. At least Jimmy Carter, as bad as he was, still had some guiding baseline principles. Joe Biden doesn't stand for anything, and I mean it. He doesn't stand for anything, and that's why he'll fall for anything, right? As a result, it often feels more helpless today than it did on those long days in the summer of 1980. I remember reading Time magazine back when it still had a smidge of integrity and value. There was a picture of burned out American helicopters in the desert with dead soldiers, several dead soldiers just lying there in the sand. But at least Jimmy Carter was trying to do something about getting the hostages released, and he apologized for the failed mission to the nation. He didn't blame others or dodge the questions. He was heartbroken by the loss of life, American lives, in that epic failure. Nothing at all like Joe Biden's complete disregard for the soldiers, the men and women that he got killed in the disastrous exit from Afghanistan that also gifted billions to our enemies along with the Bagram Air Force Base so the Chinese could move right in. By comparison, Jimmy Carter's attempt to save Americans and Joe Biden's indifference to those he got killed speak volumes about who Joe Biden really is. In just the past couple of weeks, more failures on the senile president's part. In Maui, more indifference. And worse, Joe trying to make it all about himself by sharing utterly insulting and pointless stories about a small kitchen fire where he almost lost his cat and he almost lost his car, while scores of people in Lahaina actually lost their lives. Hundreds are still missing. Many will never be recovered because they were incinerated by a wall of fire that was a direct failure of people, human failure. But like always, they can't take responsibility for anything they do. And they blame the weather and climate change. I wonder if the people in Florida that lost everything will get just $700 checks like the people in Maui that lost everything did, and then be told that's all there is. Meanwhile, we give hundreds of millions of dollars weekly to Ukraine, more and more and more. Anyway, here's the president's inspiring message about climate change, blaming it for all the ills of the world. Listen.
We're in a situation where, we're, how can I say it? There's still some deniers out there in terms of whether or not climate change has anything to do with any of this. And we're going to need a whole hell of a lot more money to deal with emergency appropriations, to deal with all you're taking care of.
The most reckless spending in America, frankly, in world history. He wants more money. Why? Because that's what cowards do. Don't admit that you've done anything wrong. Just spend more money. Declare the other side as evil. You see, real leaders stand up and admit, at least on occasion, they made a mistake. They take the heat. Like Democrat Harry Truman, who famously put a sign at his desk, "The buck stops here." Now, for the Bidens, tens of millions of bucks stopped in their bank accounts, but none of it benefited you or me. It just financed the Biden crime family. Anyway, it's been another disappointing week in many ways. And in other ways, there are signs of encouragement, like Feeble Joe's floundering poll numbers, and the indication that both black and Hispanic voters are sick of it and heading to the exit and no longer interested in supporting the failed socialist policies of these people. I want to share again one of the best things I've heard in a long time said about how useless Joe Biden really is. And then it's not the fact that he's 80. And this comes from Brit, Piers Morgan, no less. Check this out.
This is not about his age. Right, let's be clear. This is not about Joe Biden being 80. I was at an England cricket match about 4 weeks ago. England versus Australia. You should come over, guys. I'll give you a great day out.
I hear a lot about this cricket.
And I'm sitting there, and in walks Sir Mick Jagger, who had just turned 80. He's literally 7 months younger than Joe Biden. He's a guy who races around a stage for 2.5 hours a night. He never falls over. He doesn't forget the words of his lyrics. He had a conversation with me that was absolutely whip smart, funny. I even joked, you should be president of the United States. He didn't deny the allegation or the suggestion. And I did a bit of other reckoning here. So David Attenborough is 97. Do you ever hear him call a gorilla an antelope? No, you don't. The Queen was 96. Word perfect, never fell over in public. Warren Buffett is 93. His partner, Charlie Munger, is 99. When they do their annual address to their people for hours on end, they are whip smart and word perfect. So this is not about age. This is about his ability to do the job, given the condition of himself mentally and physically.
Yeah, there you have it. He just nailed it. A walk-off home run. The Queen, Sir Mick Jagger, Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, all in their 90s. Well, Jagger's 80, but still, he runs around. They're just announcing a brand new Rolling Stones tour right now. 80 years old. And he's going to go run around and do a concert for 2.5 hours at a shot at 80. So what an excellent point. Joe Biden is just not fit mentally to do the job. Everyone, even his staff, understands and knows this quite clearly. And we all know it isn't really him making the decisions. It's probably the whole hose of people in the government, a whole host of government people, that is. And this is a huge reason why this administration has been such an absolute horror, an absolute failure. Now, couple that with the fact that Joe Biden is a Democrat, and that party has gotten increasingly more crazy over the years, and you have a recipe for real disaster for this country, which is exactly what we're witnessing right now. So let's run through some of that, shall we? Here are some of the disasters. How about consumer and credit card debt? It's crushing Americans. But the administration doesn't care about average folks like you. Here's an example.
Credit card debt also way up here in the last 2 years. It is at a record high, $1 trillion. I know that may not be incredibly surprising considering what we've been through. How do people climb out of this hole when inflation is still up a bit?
So look, we have an economy that, I think I'm getting this number right, is somewhere in the neighborhood of $26 trillion. So when we start throwing around big numbers, we really have to base them on something. Now, one of the things I did about an hour ago, because I thought we might be talking about this, is I looked at credit card debt, the number you just mentioned, in relation to disposable personal income. Okay, that's income after taxes. So that's what people have to service that debt. And in fact, it is below where it was before the pandemic. It is below its pre-pandemic share. It's around 5.5%, something like that. That is an historically low amount.
You see? You're doing fine. What do you mean you don't understand? Of course, you're doing fine. He said so. You can service your debt. You fool. They're just such big numbers, right? So big that they really don't mean anything. Funny enough, that's exactly how Washington feels about our national debt. And if it weren't for the fact that the dollar is in the world's reserve currency, America, well, we would have gone insolvent a long time ago. It's also interesting how this administration acts like it doesn't matter what the little people think. Are they just so confident that their indoctrination in mass media and the social school system in this country will work again, or make people vote blue? Or do they have something else in mind that is making them feel confident? One has to wonder when you hear things like this.
And so when updated COVID shots become available in mid-September, we've heard from the FDA and CDC. They announced this last week that there will be new vaccines are we in September? Next month, mid-September. We will be encouraging all Americans to get updated COVID vaccine.
Right. Get in line, folks. Just in time for the holidays, COVID has returned to spark fear and paranoia in the streets. I'll pass, by the way. Yep, they're making a new COVID vaccine. It's supposed to roll out here in a couple of weeks or so. One where they claim it'll actually work. I mean, Joe Biden says so. Who would doubt that? But the idea of ramming COVID down America's throat when almost nobody buys into the hysteria anymore is just not a good idea. It will backfire badly, especially for historical Democrat voting blocs. Black voters, Hispanic voters, suburban moms. They've had their fill too, but here's more from KJP.
Because of this work that this president has done from the beginning of his administration, making sure there was a comprehensive approach with dealing with this pandemic, with dealing COVID-19, we have tools at our disposal now, whether it's vaccines, whether it's home tests, whether it's masks. We do have an effective treatments, obviously. We do have these tools at our disposal, and I think that's incredibly important.
Yeah, and you know why I think this might backfire? Because we're seeing more and more and more takes like this one.
If the Democrat Party and the Joe Biden administration, I'm serious right now. This ain't no threat. This ain't no nothing. This is a promise. If you think for 1 second you're gonna force me to take any thing that you tell me to do, I will you up, homie.
And have a nice weekend. Oh, boy. And after all that, I'm sorry, but is that not just funny? Take that, homie. After all that, they want to cut you off after just 2 drinks a week. Are they kidding? They ought to up the ante on that deal. And at least one member of the Senate, Ted Cruz, he had something to say about that with a few of his rowdy friends. Listen in.
What is it with liberals that want to control every damn aspect of your life? Biden came in. One of the first things they wanted to do was ban gas stoves. New York State has now done that for new construction. They're trying to go after and regulate ceiling fans. I got to tell you, it's hot in Texas. We don't want to get rid of our ceiling fans. And now these idiots have come out and said, drink 2 beers a week. That's their guideline. Well, I got to tell you, if they want us to drink 2 beers a week, frankly, they can kiss my ass.
You know, I think there might be a whole host of people that feel just like that, Mr. Cruz. Yeah. What is it with liberals anyway? It's the holiday weekend. You have my permission to have more than 2, just don't drive. All right. Coming up after the break, the Democrats are blaming Hurricane Idalia on climate change, of course. Imagine that. Mark Morano will be here to discuss actual facts and science on America's Voice Live. Well, the National Weather Service describing Hurricane Idalia as unprecedented. Based on what exactly? You have to, I guess, where it hit in the Big Bend area. Climate activists seize on the description to push the narrative that somehow weather events are growing increasingly out of control, even though we have less hurricanes now than we did in the 1950s, less tornadoes now than we did in the 1970s. But they're trying to scare Americans into getting rid of fossil fuels and mostly get rid of freedom. Join me live now to share more on why that makes sense to them, but no sense to the rest of the world. Author of The Great Reset, Mark Morano from Climate Depot. Mark, good to have you here.
Thank you, Steve. Happy to be here.
You know, interesting fact, I saw this just before we came on the air today, and I didn't realize this. Maybe you can tell me about this. Apparently, it didn't rain before the Republican Party came into existence. I didn't realize that. It did not rain until there were Republicans, and the wind never blew. There were never floods or earthquakes or mudslides or tornadoes, and certainly no hurricanes, ever. And then Republicans came along and the whole world went to hell. That's what I've learned, Mark. Am I wrong?
Well, here's the thing. I can go back to 1846. In the Maitland Mercury News in Australia, they had a story about how the indigenous people of Australia claimed the weather was different once the white man arrived on the continent. Not making that up. So this is centuries old sort of superstition baked into human experience. I mean, we want to try to find meaning, and we can easily weaponize weather and turn it to politics, turn it to cultural things. This is what they try to claim. And so you can go back centuries and find that same thing. But essentially what the climate activists do, it's like going to your boardwalk palm reader a crystal ball reader and say, what's my future look like? And they'll say, oh, I see many bad things in your future, right? They're getting your aura. Well, it turns out anytime something bad happens in your life, you lose a job, you have an accident, you have a health crisis, you can always look back and say, wow, that Boardwalk palm reader got it right. Something bad happened. They were right. They predicted it. That's what the climate activists do. They say every bad weather, climate's going to cause bad weather. Every time there's a bad weather event, they say, we predicted it, and it's consistent. There's always been bad weather. There is bad weather. There'll always be bad weather. And so
we were talking about this.
To resort to every weather event is now unprecedented in their eyes.
Unprecedented. It's the death of the planet. We talked about a couple of things here in the break, and I want to touch on one of those and something I didn't mention. Back in 1871, after Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicked over the lantern and caught Chicago on fire, if that's really the way it happened, that same day, there was the Peshtigo fire in Wisconsin, killed 8,000 people, give or take. You can look it up. It's easy to find. They were boiled in the river, literally, because the river got so hot it boiled because there was a forest fire on both sides, right? So 8,000 people. When we have these great tragic fires, the worst thing we've seen in a century is what happened in Lahaina. We know that was a lot of human error. And then you go to the worst hurricane for fatalities in American history, 1900. Corpus Christi, Texas, before they named storms. 8,000 to 12,000 people died. And this is back when there were not nearly as many people in the country. This idea, this salacious and fictitious idea that storms are getting worse, it's BS, Mark. There's no other way to put it. It's just BS.
It's such BS that even the United Nations, which claims they control the science, and they partnered with Google to make sure all your search results come back, all UN sources, in their climate reports that the UN does, even though they're activists, they have to admit this. So we know from UN reports that hurricanes, floods, tornadoes, droughts, wildfires are either on no trend or declining trends on climate timescales of 30, 50, 100 years. Absolutely true of hurricanes as well. And so what they do is they'll cherry pick one event. In fact, let's talk about Idalia in Florida. This was unprecedented. This was reported by the Associated Press, by PBS, by the wire services, by Sky News in Europe. All of this was unprecedented. Why was that storm unprecedented? We had 46 other U.S. landfalling hurricanes almost exactly like it, similar in strength and everything. Nothing unusual about it. Why? Because one 50-mile stretch of land had never received a landfalling Category 3 hurricane. That, Steve, is the equivalent of saying, I ate an unprecedented hamburger last night. Well, why was it unprecedented? Well, because I ate it in my closet, and I've never eaten a hamburger in my closet. It was an unprecedented experience. That's what we're dealing with here. They're reducing science to weaponizing every weather event, to cherry picking, and to absurd scientific claims that are so easily debunked, but they know most of the public isn't going to care, and the media doesn't care. They run with it, and all they want to do is hype every storm and turn it, in the words of meteorologist Joe Bastardi, it's climate ambulance chasing. And they're using this to create a crisis. To then declare a national.
I want to give you some examples here. I want to give the folks a couple of other examples that they can take with them for the weekend. For example, where I live in Michigan, back on Palm Sunday, 1965, there were a pair of F4 tornadoes that followed the same track. One of them was on the ground for 90 miles. It's a remarkable storm. 90 miles, mile and a half wide, F4 did tremendous damage back when there were half as many people in the state as there are today. We have not had an F4 tornado in Michigan since 1977. I'm sitting here looking at the graphs here. There hasn't been an F5 tornado in the United States since 2013. We haven't had an F5 tornado in this country in 10 years. Storms are getting worse. Where? The number of F5s in 1974 alone, if you go back to 1974, they had 29 F4s, 7 F5s. We don't have anything like that, Mark. Nothing like that. I mean,
nothing.
I can look, and this is from just basic statistics, for gosh sakes.
F3 and larger tornadoes are down dramatically since the 1950s. We've had recent years of record low just tornadoes in general, let alone the devastating tornadoes. what they do, and this is important, when you walk into a casino, you can see this is a psyop. You see the wall of winners. They have pictures of all the people who won at slots with the big 10,000, I won 10,000, the cardboard check, 100,000, I won $500,000. They give you the impression that everyone is winning the slot machine. And in reality, all they're doing is, they're luring you in with false information, just like the lottery. Your chance of winning the lottery is very low. Your chance of someone somewhere winning the lottery is very high because someone's going to win the lottery. So they pick all those lottery winners out and they create the impression that bad weather is happening everywhere. Yet we know on decadal timescales, 10, 30, 50, 100, it's not happening. If anything, as CO2 has risen, extreme weather has gotten less bad, less severe globally. And again, this is baked in.
And vegetation grows faster because CO2 is painful. One other thing, I will say one thing about science. Because they say, well, there's a lot more tornadoes now than there's ever been. Weird that we have all these more tornadoes, but no F4s and F5s to speak of. You know why that is, of course? Doppler radar. We can identify tornadoes that were missed pretty much all the time before because they'd go through a cornfield in the middle of Iowa and nobody ever really saw it. It turned over 2 farm wagons, and it was an EF0 or an EF1, and nobody ever knew it. Right? We can find those tornadoes now. So today we have 1,200 EF0s in the country. Back in the 50s, you had like 3. So honestly, I mean, look at the numbers. Mark, I'll give you the last word.
Yes, it's all much better. That's why Al Gore will say, we have more tornadoes. They'll claim, we didn't have the satellites monitoring, but even like wildfires, we're down dramatically over 100 years. Here's the final word. 100 years, the climate-related weather death toll has dropped 98, 99% globally. So we are much better at dealing with this extreme weather. And thanks to fossil fuels, we have better measuring, better warning systems. If only they'd use it. They didn't use it in Hawaii. They didn't even sound the sirens. But so
Correct.
That's the bottom line. There is no crisis, but they're going to try to create one. They want a national climate emergency to bypass democracy.
They certainly do, to lock everybody down. You know what was unprecedented about this last hurricane? 1 death in Florida, 1 in Georgia. That was the last number I saw. 2 people died in a great, tragic. Come on. Mark, always good to see you. Go out there. Don't be fearful. It'll be okay, I promise.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it.
As always, good conversation with Mark. He's got a great sense of humor, and I appreciate that. After the break, the House is finally talking about impeaching President Biden. That is no joke. It's about time. It's coming up next on America's Voice Live.
4636. The park.
Ongoing negotiations with the university. True? Not true? We'll find out soon enough. Well, a new kind of rat pack has been invading New York City as the rat problem has become a tourist attraction. New York has always had rats, but last... All right, well, House Oversight Chair Congressman James Comer says the House is just about ready to move forward with an impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden. He says why. Listen to this.
Chair Comer, let's move on to this. Will House Republicans launch an impeachment inquiry into President Biden after Labor Day?
I feel pretty confident we will. I had a long conversation with Speaker McCarthy yesterday. You look at what we found just in the last 10 days with respect to not only the president having pseudonyms in 5,400 emails, but also copying his son in some of them pertaining to Ukraine. That ties Joe Biden to Hunter Biden, to firing the prosecutor for no good reason in Ukraine, only to save Hunter from being investigated for corruption in Ukraine. We also have learned that Hunter Biden flew with his father on Air Force Two 15 times at least. This hasn't been something that Joe Biden has admitted to in the past. He's only said a few times did his son fly on Air Force Two. So the evidence continues to pile in, and one reason that we've waited this long on impeachment inquiry is to make sure that we had as much evidence as possible. And getting this evidence is like pulling teeth. No one in the Biden orbit is cooperating with us. The government is obstructing, but yet we're still able to find more evidence. And I think that everyone in the Republican conference sees now that we have no choice but to move towards impeachment.
Long believed they were above the rule of law. Hopefully after Labor Day, that doesn't prove true. We'll see if it plays out. In Chicago this week, a reporter and a cameraman for a Spanish-language TV station, Univision Chicago, robbed at gunpoint while trying to report on a string of robberies that had taken place in that area. Yeah, you can't make it up. This is actually the second time the scenario has happened for news crews for this station just this month. Univision Chicago says it plans on assigning security to news crews who are out reporting from now on. I mean, why have police around? Defund the police, good idea. The team was filming on the street at 5 a.m. Monday when three men wearing ski masks approached them with firearms, took their cameras and other valuables. Democrat leadership in the city has no meaningful plans to deal with the out-of-control crime. Brandon Johnson, the new mayor, actually worse than Lori Lightfoot. If that was even possible, I didn't think so. Gosh, hold my beer. For instance, by the way, in 2022, Chicago experienced more than 20,000 car thefts. What's Mayor Brandon Johnson doing about all this? Suing automakers, Hyundai and Kia, for making their cars too easy to steal. Not the criminals, not the out-of-control crime. No, let's attack the car makers. Time for Democrats to spend half the energy they do on jailing Donald Trump and actually jailing real criminals. Call me crazy. All right, there's an organization that still backs Obamacare, gun control, and extreme transgender policies that endanger our kids. They claim to be bipartisan, but of course, last year, 95% of their donations went to Democrats. Doesn't sound bipartisan, does it? That's AARP. That organization does not represent you or the values of American seniors. Fortunately, there is a conservative alternative, AMAC. The Association of Mature American Citizens proudly champions Americans' right to free speech, religious liberty, and the Second Amendment. AMAC defends parents' rights to protect their children and is fighting to restore America's election integrity, too. With more than 2 million members and growing nationwide, AMAC is pro-faith, pro-family, and pro-freedom, thank God. I'm proud to be an AMAC member, and I encourage you to join today. Let's send AARP a strong message. They don't represent conservative seniors. Join AMAC today at amac.us/voice. That's amac.us/VOICE, and you can get involved, and it'll be great. Coming up after the break, a judge rejected a Wyoming sorority house lawsuit. Now the sisters have no choice but to accept a biological male into their home as a girl. Morgan McMichael will talk with me next on AVL. Don't go anywhere. ever happen to believe all women? Nah, not convenient right now. A United States District Court is rejecting a lawsuit from 7 young women who are in a Wisconsin sorority. That's a Wyoming sorority, excuse me, that the sororities organization has unjustly changed its tradition and made these girls uncomfortable. They allowed in a guy living as a woman to be there. The woman blasted the organization in its lawsuit for concluding that, quote, a man can become a Kappa member if he claims to have a subjective belief that he is a woman. The lawsuit alleges that the member, Artemis Langford, has indicated that he's sexually interested in women, which his Tinder profile also claims. And women say that they've noticed him aroused in the sorority house on occasions when they were all together. They say their privacy has been violated by his persistent perverted questioning about their reproductive parts, breast cup size, what kind of birth control they use, and so on and so forth. The court has ruled that it would not define the word woman in its ruling and that it cannot interfere with the sorority's freedom of association by ruling against its decision to induct a transgender woman. Joining me live now to discuss Turning Point contributor Morgan McMichael. We've taken leave of our senses in some places, but in other places not so much. At least I'm seeing movement in places like the UK and Sweden and some other countries in Europe saying, okay, no more transitioning of youth, no more puberty blockers, no more disfigurement surgeries. So we're seeing some progress, but then I see this out of Wyoming, and I'm like, really? Have they lost their minds?
It makes me really sad. They have lost their minds, and it makes me really sad to see that this is happening in a sorority, which is supposed to be a protected women's space. As an alumna of my old sorority, Alpha Xi Delta, when I was in college, it just makes me even more sad knowing that, you know, there are real women going through this recruitment process, and they may not get a bid into the chapter that they want to be in because of now a biological man. This case has been ongoing, and the fact that the court tossed out the case and could not identify or define what a woman is, it kind of brings me back to when Ketanji Brown Jackson also conveniently couldn't define what a woman is, when we all know a woman has XX chromosomes. But other than that, having a biological male living in a sorority house absolutely just violates every single one of these women's safe spaces. And I just want to know why the university even allowed this, and how Kappa Kappa Gamma was allowed to change their bylaws from women to anyone who identifies as a woman.
Couldn't, the right move to me, if this is the way they're going to go, you just leave. Yeah, all the women should just leave. Hey, fella, if you want this place, it's yours. We're out of here. Go join a different sorority. Do something. Just leave. Financially destroy the place and leave. I mean, the only thing that these folks pay attention to, whether it's Bud Light or Target or this sorority, is finances. Boom. Get rid of the chapter. I mean, wouldn't you do that?
100%. I mean, every single one of these chapters, regardless of whatever sorority it is on campuses, are making thousands of dollars every single semester through their dues. And so 100%, the women need to stand up, which I applaud these women who actually did put forth a lawsuit. And now a couple of the women I know are alumnas of the sorority, and they're continuing to fight to protect women's spaces, because also we can't have every single woman just leave their sorority and then drop and no longer be a member, when in reality we need to be standing up against the radical transgender agenda and protecting these spaces so that women can actually have women's spaces. Because I guarantee you're not seeing trans men trying to rush fraternities, and I know that the fraternities are putting a stop to that and not allowing women to join their fraternities. And so what happened to just protecting women's sports, women's safe spaces? What happened to the Me Too movement when it came to women in this case? And the transgender movement has completely infiltrated feminism and the women's empowerment movement.
It has. It erases women. It says that being a woman in and of itself is just, a social construct. You want to be a woman, be a woman. I mean, it just completely delegitimizes true womanhood, does it not?
No, it absolutely does. It erases what womanhood is by redefining a definition. We've now seen even dictionary definitions of women and gender being completely changed. And we all know it's not just a social construct. Biology is rooted in truth and fact, and the left can't seem to grasp the truth and fact when it comes to this. And we're continuing to play into their delusion, and that's what they're trying to come across. I mean, look at the indoctrination that's happening in schools as young as kindergarten. You know, students are starting to learn now that you can explore explore your gender and sexuality as a 5-year-old, which is absolutely ridiculous. So we need to stop affirming that the delusion that's going on in our country.
Yeah, I don't remember exploring, sexuality when I was 5 or 6 or 8. It doesn't happen, right? They can decide when they're 3. No, they can't. There's a reason people under 18 can't enter into a contract. There's a reason people under 18 can't do a whole series of things, drink, smoke, do all sorts of things, because they're not of the maturity level required to make those kinds of decisions. Yet we're giving them the power to disfigure themselves permanently and have a lifelong connection to medical treatment because you can't escape it. It's insanity defined. Right. Morgan, I'll give you the last word.
You mentioned monetarily how these patients, these transgender patients, are becoming lifelong patients. I mean, if you remember, Vanderbilt University took down their webpage after they claimed how these gender-affirming surgeries are big money makers for them. And that's what it's all about, is money and control and having more power. And we need to put a stop to this transgender movement being a part of feminism and women's empowerment, and actually protect real women and having our safe spaces and just being able to be a woman.
I agree with that, Morgan. I appreciate you being here. You enjoy your weekend and celebrate being a woman in America. Thank you.
I will do that. Thank you, Steve, for having me on.
Always. Thank you. After the break, competitive swimmer and female sports activist Riley Gaines, speaking of all this, puts former sports commentator Keith Olbermann in his place after he had some, remarkably stupid things to send her way in remarks. Stick around. You'll love the way that she mic dropped his dumb, Well, a recent social media outburst from former sports commentator and, political arsonist Keith Olbermann, now a podcaster and dwindling media personality because, frankly, he's just pissed everybody off. He took aim at Riley Gaines for her support of women's sports. What started his rant? Well, Gaines had tweeted, "Remember to vote," after Senator Megan Hunt bashed Governor James Pillen for signing the Women's Bill of Rights. Olbermann alleged that Riley sucks at swimming. really called her a nasty, stupid, unsuccessful transphobe. But she did not lose her last race to transgender swimmer Leah Thomas, a guy. They tied. And Gaines was unfairly denied the trophy by college swimming authorities for a photo op. Gaines responded with a humorous display of her impressive accolades and achievements. Listen to this. All right, well, we'll listen to it another time. Gaines shows her remarkable record far exceeds Olbermann's own remarkably unimpressive accomplishments in front of the camera. He's been fired every place he goes. You know why? You know why. A Chino Hills, California, Robert Townsend Junior High School teacher Clifford Harper, 49, arrested last week for suspected intoxication during regular class hours. San Bernardino County Sheriff's deputies moved swiftly on a complaint from concerned school staff who believed Harper was under the influence while instructing students. He's facing a potential charge of public intoxication and child endangerment and is currently on administrative leave awaiting further investigation by law enforcement. Now, Harper's arrest is just one of a recent string of drunk teachers on the job, including Tegan Leonhardt of Marin County, California, Kimberly Coates, Perkins, Oklahoma. Wow. Just get hammered and have a good day at school. Wow. A Livingston, New Jersey video footage obtained by James O'Keefe's O'Keefe Media Group, OMG, has exposed hushed conversations between school board officials and local police. Police body cam video reveals school officials calling the police on citizens they deemed unfamiliar and Trumpish. Trumpish during a public school board meeting. You got to hear this. Roll it.
They're different looking. Some, they look Trumpish. And to be like, they look a little scary. Some of them out, they don't look like Livingston. So
like an Antifa, not like an Antifa, but some along those lines.
That's exactly what we're thinking.
I think there's more like intimidate, stir a pot. Like
equity audit.
Equity audit for what?
To make sure that we're equitable. It's a really hot meeting.
It's a very sensitive topic.
Yes. O'Keefe Media Group exposed the rot undermining our society. James O'Keefe offers tools for transparency to disgruntled parents in another New Jersey school district.
They look shady. Like
yes, they definitely look like there's something up.
Trumpish people. We'll have none of those Trumpish people here. What the hell's wrong with these people? The video captures executive assistant to the superintendent, Tony McLaughlin, telling officers Pension that police were called because they didn't recognize 9 attendees and felt like they didn't look like typical Livingston residents. Oh. What do you call that? Profiling? Oh, yeah. Pension is heard dismissing O'Keefe's journalist status and asserts he didn't answer to journalists, implying that citizens attending the meeting were not welcome. Listen.
Do they have a right to do this?
No, technically, no. You have to be a Livingston resident.
Or
you can work in Livingston. You have to have some type of affiliation.
Connection with Livingston. Mm-hmm. Other than that, these things shouldn't be. Yeah. We shouldn't be needed for something like this. Yeah. But you have these groups that they just want nothing better to do.
Yeah. New Jersey's Open Public Meetings Act guarantees public access to school board meetings, regardless of residency and where you live. The video further revealed Suzanne Berman showing the officer her video, scanning license plates in the school parking lot without any evidence of criminal activity. O'Keefe questions why government officials and police are averse to citizen participation in public affairs, which ensures accountability and transparency. Of course, they had no answers for that either. All right, the Western Heights Public School District in Oklahoma has hired 52-year-old Dr. Shane Brent Mernon as an elementary school principal at John Glenn Elementary. Mernon's a drag queen, arrested in 2001 on child pornography charges. Oh, yeah, this is who you want in charge. According to V1SUT, Mernon had his personal devices confiscated by police on suspicion of possession of child porn and arrested 2 weeks later. At the time, he was a 5th grade teacher at Will Rogers Elementary School in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Mernon's case, dismissed in 2002, the court determined the pictures were an accident and the age of the individuals could not be proven. Mernon's record was eventually expunged in 2003 after completing probation on a drug charge. Oh, yeah, you want this guy with kids. Mernon has been involved in education for more than 25 years, works weekends at Boom in Oklahoma City, hosting a Sunday brunch revival of the farcical church service. He has won both Miss Gay Oklahoma and Miss Gay Oklahoma US of A and says By day, he's an assistant principal molding young minds. By night, he's the life of the party. Okay. Go with that. A Fort Collins, Colorado man suing after police pepper sprayed him for refusing a trespassing citation, leaving him functionally blind. Attorney Sarah Schulke filed a civil rights lawsuit on behalf of Andrew Kulis, naming the city of Fort Collins and officers Kevin Park and Avery Hanslick. Kulis has lost his father and was out with friends when police confronted them. Kulis and another man were accused of going onto the rooftop of Brothers Bar and Grill. Neither was on the roof when police arrived, so there you go. We'll get back to the news after a quick break and a message from our sponsor, Birch Gold. Central banks, as you know, in China, India, and Australia are transitioning to a digital currency. The Federal Reserve now contemplating the same for the U.S. A digital currency. The government could track every single purchase you make, of course. Officials could even prohibit you from buying things they didn't want you to. Oh, your footprints, too much. They can freeze or seize your money. Text America to 989898. Claim your free information kit on gold. It'll be nice to have some gold to depend on now, wouldn't it? After the break, a story that reminds us how wonderful America is, plus the question of the day here on AVL. Always want to leave you with a smile on your face. That's right. One thing about Americans, we love our kids and we love our pets. Those two things alone give us a glimpse into what a slice of heaven just might look like, right? Take a look at this adorable video showing a little boy in stitches. His 4 golden retriever puppies shower him with a puppy bomb of affection. 4-year-old can't stop giggling as the pack of 9-week-old pups jump on him until the laughing toddler is helpless to get up. He is defenseless, folks. Watch.
Stop it!
Yeah, if that doesn't put a smile on your face, nothing will. The poor little feller getting mauled by golden retriever pups. I don't know what. Well, it sure looks like a fun home to grow up in, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. All right. How about the America's Voice question of the day? Will you comply with any new COVID mandates? I'm going to guess what the answers are going to be like here. I'm going to, no. Lori Costello, no, I will not follow those communist mandates. Jim Deco, I didn't the last time, and I won't this time. Willis Wood weighs in. That's a big no. Big no. Patrick Bergeron, no, and no. Jim Haddon, nope, mandates are actually unconstitutional. Joe, I agree with you on that. Sean Jenks says absolutely no. Not going to happen. Yano Gar, no, I'm good. Jennifer White, nope, I did not the first time. Don Kirk weighing in. I didn't the last time. I see no reason to change. I guess I'm with you there, Don. I mean, be consistent. Mark Halliman writes, no, I won't comply. It's convenient how COVID is back just in time for the election. Ken and Amanda Sepulewski didn't comply that last time. Not going to start now. I mean, why would you? Why would you? All right. So here's how I'm going to celebrate Labor Day. You know, to celebrate the Green New Deal, I'm going to, char animal flesh on open flames. Consume adult beverages. Celebrate the fact that I'm a God-living, God-loving, God-fearing American. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. Char animal flesh on open flame and drink adult beverages and howl at the moon, maybe. Maybe you should do the same. Drop me a line. Go to stevegruber.com. Send me a note. Hey, Grubes, this is what I'm doing for the weekend. Here's what's happening in my neck of the woods. And don't forget to join us. We got special programming on Monday, back on Tuesday with the Steve Gruber Show and America's Voice Live. Don't miss any of it.